Before the meeting commences, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the land of the Vidigal and the Gadigal people who occupied the Sydney coast, being the traditional owners. On behalf of Randwick Local Planning Panel, I acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders past and present and the Aboriginal people in attendance today. Good afternoon and welcome to the Randwick Local Planning Panel meeting on the 8th of August 2024. I'm the chair of the panel. My name's Julie Walsh and I'm sitting with expert panel members Stephen Elshin, Sue Weatherly and community member Kate Kelly. Prior to the commencement of this meeting, all panel members were required to sign a declaration of interest in relation to each matter on the agenda. In relation to this public meeting, I can confirm that I declared in respect of the item for 3 to 7 Bona Vista Avenue, Maroubra, I declare a non-significant non-pecuniary interest as I'm a member of 2 local planning panels on which Jason Perica, the town planner for the applicant, is also a member. I have no professional or personal relationship with Mr. Perica, and the likelihood of us sitting together at the same time on these panels is very infrequent, and in those circumstances I will participate in the item. I understand that Ms. Weatherly also has do you have any declaration?
I do in relation to, I forget which item number it is.
Just in the public meeting?
Not in the public meeting. I will make actually the same declaration. Mr. Perica and I are on the same planning panels, but I do not know Mr. Perica personally or professionally, and therefore I'm declaring a non-pecuniary, non-significant, non-pecuniary, or thank you. Yeah, whatever. Sorry. As per the chair, it's a much more eloquent way of saying it.
And Mr. Elton, you have the same.
Thank you. Yes. I had occasion to work with Mr. Perica some 3 or 4 years ago on some infrastructure matters, and also we worked together on the Liverpool Local Planning Panel during this term. So I'm also declaring a non-professional, non-pecuniary interest in the matter that he's involved with, that 3 to 7 Bona Vista Avenue. I do not believe it's going to have any implications for my judgment in the matter.
And the community member, Kate Kelly, you don't have any conflicts to declare?
No conflict.
Thank you. Today we have 2 items on the agenda of the public meeting, and we have a number of people registered to address the panel. Registered speakers will be heard in the following order: objectors followed by the applicant. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the panel. The panel has been provided with copies of all of the submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the application. Therefore, there's no need for speakers to repeat all the points made in those submissions. Speakers should focus on the key matters they wish us to understand and consider, including any suggestions about how their concerns could be resolved. The applicant may wish to comment on issues raised in the council report, provide a response to the proposed conditions, and or address any issues raised by objectors. After the speaker has addressed the panel, which is limited to 3 minutes, the panel members may ask the speaker questions to clarify any matters. Only registered speakers will be allowed to speak and respond to questions from the panel. Any person using defamatory or offensive language may be asked to leave the meeting, or the meeting may be adjourned. An audio recording is being made of this meeting, and we ask that speakers use the microphones on their device when addressing the panel to ensure that their comments are recorded. The audio recording will be available through Council's website by tomorrow afternoon. After all registered speakers have been heard, the panel will deliberate and vote on each matter in a closed session. The first application with registered speakers that's to be considered is 3 to 7 Bona Vista Avenue, Maroubra. I have 2 speakers, Kylie Quinn-Libben, an objector, and Jason Perica, planner. Sorry, 3 speakers, Jason Perica, planner, and Dominic Levine, architect for the applicant. So if I could invite Kylie Quinn-Libben to please speak, noting that there is a 3-minute time limit and it will
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm speaking against the application on 3 to 7 Bona Vista. So I'm on the corner. I'm the direct neighbour at 1 Bona Vista Avenue. And the reason why I object to the application, I think there are two key things in relation to this application. One is, I think the key issue relates to views, and the second is to the sheer scale of the proposal for 3 to 5. Now, in relation to 3 to 7, they've made two applications. The original application was one of height, and this second amended application is one of depth. And I would say that the objective in both cases is really to take advantage of a southeast view corridor that goes down to the Maroubra Beach Sands. And I think that was very clear in the amended proposal, in the submissions. The town planner, Mr. Perica, made clear in the C for that in that original decision to go high was to maintain those diagonal views that we enjoy, and has now proposed the depth instead as an amended proposal. And the scale, I think, with which the application has the proposal then has arisen is really arising because it is sort of, they've put in these artifices which are, second story gardens, etc., really to push their bedrooms and everything out into this viewing corridor. Now, the viewing corridor is enjoyed not just by us, which is the direct neighbour, but also along Sackville Street and across, and you can see it actually when you walk down the path to Sackville Street to the Marne Pool, you can actually see the beach as you walk past. So, for example, when you look at, and I've referenced some cases in my objection, but for example, I think the factual matrix in this one is very similar to the matter of Furlong versus the Northern Beaches. In that particular case, and in this one here, what we see is that they've actually put on their second level against our boundary, they've put where the house sits, they've actually put a second level garden to push the bedroom all the way across. So it uses the full depth of the land to go across. And if you have a look, where they've met their building to land ratio, all of that garden and stuff is internal. So it doesn't benefit the public or any of the neighbourhood in any way. The volume of the building is very large. In terms of the controls, you're obviously planners, but against all of the numerical controls, there are qualitative elements to be taken into account. I think one of those being reasonable view sharing, and I think it's quite safe to say when you have a look at the way in which this proposal sits on the land, it pushes the siting and it shifts the bulk of the density of that building from the front, aligns with where all the other buildings are, to the back of that thing. It's the back of the lots, really changing the sort of the neighbourhood character.
And that was the 3-minute bell. If you could please complete your submission.
Sure. So essentially, what I want to say is that I think the application really sort of affects the views. When you look at the unrenovated prices of those properties, our unrenovated blocks of 4.6, each of those other blocks that they've bought are $1.6 to $800,000 less, and that is because the natural topography of that land doesn't permit those views. And by pushing forward and allowing this development, you're actually upsetting both the natural topography of the land and the way in which views are accessible and inherent in those land, and also what the market has properly attributed for those blocks. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just check if there are any. Did you have any questions, Ms. Mandel?
No, I don't have any questions.
Did you have
No questions.
No, thank you for coming along and addressing us today.
Thank you.
So that was the only objector. Who would like to go first for the applicant? Mr. Perica or Mr. Levine?
I might go first, if that's okay, Chair.
Mr. Perica.
So Chair, panel members and senior staff, thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name's Jason Perica, Town Planner for the owner and applicant of the DA. I'm here to speak in support of the recommendation of the Independent Planning Assessment Report by Council staff for approval, including the conditions. I'd like to also acknowledge the hard work, professionalism and open communication from Council staff. It hasn't been easy for us to get to this point, with its significant amendments made and concessions having been made, and ultimately arriving at a relatively unusual, highly compliant proposal. It's clear from the submission the talk today from the previous speaker and neighbour at number 1, Bona Vista, that the key issue of concern is views. Of course, I can say it's understandable that people who have views want to maintain them. It's also understandable that people who have sites want to make use of views that are available. But planning's not about first in, best dressed, and view sharing is view sharing. not view maintenance. If view maintenance was the guiding principle in planning, there would be no development. Instead, consideration of view sharing necessitates a clear and logical yet balanced assessment. The principles for this are in the well-known Tenacity court case, which has been thoroughly addressed and assessed in the council staff report for 15 pages, and by us through analysis and accurate montages. We acknowledge there are impacts on number one, including diagonal views across the side boundary towards the beach, and we accept they will be affected. But it is noted those views are across the side boundary. The impacts not arise from a non-compliance. Indeed, the rear setbacks complies and is exceeded at the first floor, and the proposed height is well below by around 24% of the standard, allowing some, albeit relatively minor, retention of view and headland glimpses of the first floor that may not otherwise be achieved. There is potential for future extensions eastward for number one, which may regain views being affected currently. It's also noted there are valuable water views retained and a wide panorama of outlook and views not affected by the proposal. Balanced assessment, in my view, in accordance with the Tenacity principles, warrants support of the DA, as also concluded by council staff. Just briefly, I know time's limited, but in terms of compliance, I did mention it was relatively unusual. I think it is. The proposal is around 25% below the FSR, between 12 and 38% below the height limit, 29% below the site coverage, meets front, side and rear setbacks in parts exceeded, with only an eave beyond the envelope control, complies with deep soil, landscaping, tree cover with a 12:1 ratio compared to existing trees, exceeds open space, meets two-storey control, meets overshadowing controls to all neighbours, meets car parking controls, meets orientation and balcony controls, meets wall length and articulation controls, and retains ground levels close to neighbours. All sections within council support the proposal.
So that was the 3-minute bell. If you could please.
Thank you. That's it from me. I'm not sure. I think Mr. Levine, as the architect, could probably answer questions from the panel, and both he and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. I mean, it's an unusual situation, consolidation of 3 sites, and I know that you say that you meet the side setback controls, but was there any consideration given to actually having a larger side setback control, particularly to the 1 Bona Vista Avenue?
Well, I think whether it's 1 lot or 3, it would have been the same control. And there was some movement of massing, and that's true, and some of that has moved towards the rear of number 1. But given we comply with side setback control for either 1 lot or 3, we thought that was a reasonable proposal. And in trying to, I think the main water glimpses and beach glimpses occur at the first floor. So by lowering the height and stepping back the rear boundary, we believe that had a greater impact on retaining some views and potentially increasing the side setback.
Thank you. And my other question is, I'm looking at the business paper, and so the page numbers are the page numbers. Yep. I have the business paper, so it's page 35 and 36 of the business paper. So there's some photo montages. So it's figure 36 and 38 show a photo montage looking from 1 Bona Vista.
Yeah.
And just wondered if you could tell me, they're obviously just showing the volume. It doesn't show any detail, but where are they from and what are they accurate? I mean, maybe the architect can answer that. Yeah,
maybe the architect can talk about the methodology, the Land and Environment Corp principles we use, but maybe Dominic can answer that. They appear
to be accurate to you, because when I looked at those, it's not a question of view, but it was just the sheer proximity and that bulk as shown in that photo montage I found quite stark.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is a massing rather than a visually accurate representation of the side elevation, which has step setbacks and different materials. So, yeah, as that representation, it won't look like that. The north elevation, I think, is in the business papers, and where they're taken from, I think, is in the labelling below. But yeah, that's certainly not what the buildings will look like.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions?
I had the same question, but I have an answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hodgson? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. Firstly, the question about the garden area next to the pool. I suppose the direct question is, why do you think it's needed, given the view issues, why do you think some of those garden areas at the side of the pool need to be quite as large as they are?
Dominic, you want to answer that? I'm not sure if you're there and you might be on mute.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep.
I apologise. I'm not sure my camera's working, so you'll just have to hear me if that's okay. So just to clarify, we're talking about the landscape areas adjacent to the pool. If you just maybe can clarify that for me, please.
I'm looking at the plan marked ground floor plan.
Yes.
And I'm looking, for example, at the garden area to the north, I think it would be, of the pool deck.
Yes, so there's sort of a series of garden beds leading up towards the media games room.
Yep.
Yes, so I mean, these widths are effectively accommodating the appropriate sort of landscape minimum. So obviously we've got 900 that happens between the deck and the pool fence, and then just over that for that strip, that middle strip, and then you have that third strip before the media games room, which is just over that 900. So they're all trying to achieve that minimum landscape area.
Thank you. One other question. If the panel was of a mind to grant consent, one of the draft conditions relates to street planting related to, I think, some Banksias and the like. They're relatively small pots, and I think just the 3 plants. If the panel was to increase the pot size and perhaps the number of the Banksias, would that be an issue for the applicant?
I don't believe so, no.
No. I think there's conditions about the 3 and the size. I think they came from Council's landscape officer, and I think they wanted to undertake the work, was my reading of it, because of the payment to cover the cost of that. But yeah, I'm not sure about the rationale for the landscaping officer, whether they prefer the smaller ones or larger. It's certainly not an issue for our client.
Thank you.
Did you have any questions?
No questions.
Yeah, I wanted to ask the architect seeing who's there about those 2 montages, the figure 36 and figure 38. If you could, you heard me ask Mr. Perico about those. I just wanted to know what you said.
So we're talking about the photo montages?
Yeah, the photo montages. So they're figure 36 and 38 on pages 35 and 36 of the reports they're showing.
Okay, so the same question that you asked earlier, yeah?
Yes.
Yes, so I think what sort of impacts the way that these read is obviously the quite deep setback that number 1 has. Relevant to what our setback is. Obviously, there's limited detail. We are just trying to show the overall massing in the way that has been reduced through that latest revision. You can see the lighter shaded portion, so that's pulling that back. But yes, I think it's mainly a result of the large setback of number 1, which makes our proposal seem to be more dominant.
But in terms of the accuracy of it, Dominic, the whole principle and procedure in the Land and Environment Court process of wireframes using the survey data, overlaying that with the photos and checking, all of that was followed.
Yeah, so that was a statement that was provided by the photomontage. Sorry, I'll start again. There was a statement provided by the photomontage consultant that details the process and that it was done accurately in terms of overlaying and mapping against their context. So we understand that it was done according to the correct procedure, and there's a statement that presents that.
But the northern elevation has the detail of the articulation and the different.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, we have that. Thank you. All right. So there's no other questions. So that completes the speakers for that item, and we'll move on to the second item, which is 18 to 28 Peruse Road, Randwick. The first objector I have is Lisa Scoble.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that, folks. Let's start again. Thank you. Firstly, I just wanted to say that I'm not an objector. I'm in support of the development. I think it'll really tidy up that street corner nicely. I am also probably the most affected party of the works because my property is 15 Sudan Street, which is a residential semi, fronts onto Sudan Street and is the immediate neighbour to the west of the development. So I share my entire long side boundary of the semi with the property. I want clarification on 2 points in the conditions of consent. They may already be addressed, but without an expert eye, I can't find where they're addressed. The first one is the DA 318 plan on council's website shows that there's a solid high fence between my property and the neighbour's property, but I've been told separately that it's actually only a 50 centimetre retaining wall with fencing above. I've seen materiality documents on document DA 263, and it references a dark bronze look slatted style fence. So I just want clarification as to whether it will be just the 50 centimetre high retaining wall, and is it conditioned that is the style of fence, the dark bronze vertical blade slatted fence with open aspect that I will get between my property and the development? Because there's a bit of contradiction in what's available in the plans. I'd be, I guess, in terms of what I would like, I'd be certainly quite comfortable with the 50 centimetre high retaining wall, but I do like the quality fence above. I just want to make sure that the document showing that style of fence includes those private boundaries, not just on the street frontage, so that we get the same dark bronze vertical blade fence above that is shown in other parts of the development. That's the first one. Second one is screening of the movements of cars. I'm a little concerned that the entrance to the car park will result in noise and it'll have a visual impact, particularly from headlights at night into bedroom windows. I know that there are deep soil plantings along that boundary, which is great, but I did see a note there's going to be a pedestrian entry now added, and that will, I guess, reduce the width of the deep soil plantings and reduce the protection between my side boundary windows and those car movements. Is it possible to have perhaps some kind of screening of that driveway where the cars enter to reduce noise or to filter out the impact of, I guess, seeing a lot of car movements along my side boundary where they haven't been before, and also headlights at night?
Thank you. I might just ask the council officer, are you able to, is there a council officer who's online who might be able to answer those questions?
Yes, Chair. It's William here.
Yeah.
I'll just give me one moment. I'll just bring up the plans. So yeah, so in my understanding of the plans, I'm looking at drawing DA 262, which is the materiality sheet 3. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be an indication of the materiality of the retaining wall, the 500 millimetre high retaining wall. But there is a notation on there above that for the screening to be VB1, dark bronze vertical screening. But it's not, yeah, I think the neighbour is correct that it could be maybe clarified what the materiality in that interface is. And maybe it would be a consideration for the panel just to consider that as part of a determination.
I think the applicant's going to address this, so I'll ask the applicant that question when we come to him. And then the second question was about some sort of screening to address the issue of car headlights and noise into the garage.
Yeah, so we did have a look at that kind of impact and whether they would be able to put a screening with a sort of ramp transition coming in from the access. I guess we were satisfied that the retaining wall and the fencing along the boundary, which would be up to 2.3 metres, and then the landscaping forward of that would be sufficient in screening any kind of headlight impact that may be affecting those bedroom windows, taking into account that, yeah, that dwelling is on a lower elevation or a lowest, it's not level with that level to the property. So yeah, on balance, I think we were satisfied that it was accounted for.
Could I add one point there that a consideration of that was prior to the addition of the pedestrian entry that's just been recently added and will reduce the depth of that deep soil planting buffer.
Okay, well, I'll ask the applicant for his response to that, and we'll check the consideration when we go into closed session whether we need to impose any additional conditions.
Thanks.
Thank
so
you,
the next speaker I have is Leanne Warden.
My name is Leanne Warden and I live at 11 Sudan Street, which is the third single-storey semi on the western side of the development. Despite Council recommending the proposal for approval, I still have some concerns. My primary concern is about the interface between the proposed building and the heritage conservation area to the west and southwest, which includes concerns about the visual bulk, the lack of landscaping, the non-compliant setbacks and the overlooking. I disagree with Council when they say that the building will not be overbearing to the HCA as it shares a similar bulk to 32 Peruse Road. 32 Peruse Road is a very imposing building, and after it was built, it became apparent that impacts on the HCA were overlooked in the planning phase, including that the second and third floors had a direct line of sight into my bathroom and eat-in kitchen, and this was not demonstrated in any of the drawings in the planning phase. I had to purchase new window coverings to prevent prying eyes into my private space. And the only thing that has saved the community from the full impact of the imposing facade is that it's now covered in vegetation, which was requested by the residents opposing that development. And as was the case with 32 Peruse Road, there are no documents that illustrate the relationship of the proposed building to the west and southwest residents in the HCA. So I'm not reassured that there is no direct line of sight into my eastern windows or my backyard from the western windows, and Council refer to overlooking and visual bulk and the impact on number 15 Sudan Street, but there's no reference to the impact on my home, despite me raising this concern in both my objections. The landscaping is inadequate around the proposed development, and it is an effective way to disguise a facade of an overbearing building as demonstrated at 32 Peruse Road. The proposed building is a 3-storey building to Peruse Road and a 4-storey building to the west, with 6 single-level dwellings immediately to the west in Sudan Street. There will be a stark contrast at street level in Sudan Street when viewed as a whole, and no documents show the extent of the dominance. Setbacks are non-compliant as demonstrated in the drawings, exacerbating the visual bulk. I am aware that my neighbours, Richard and Heidi, have made suggestions, and I'm requesting that if the panel decides to approve the development, that you impose these further amendments as suggested by Richard and Heidi to negate the negative impacts to the HCA. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just check if there are any questions. Did you have any questions?
I don't have any.
Did you have any questions? No questions. Thank you. Thank you for coming on and addressing us today. The next objector I have is Richard Peters.
Hi. Yes, my name is Richard Peters. I will disclose I'm an architect with over 25 years experience practicing in Sydney, specialising in residential development. I live directly with my partner Heidi. We live basically just to the southwest of the development, so exactly behind number 15. I've raised a number of issues in relation. We do support a development. We acknowledge that something does need to be, done, and that's fine. We just have concerns around the sensitivity of the interface, especially at the western side of the building and the southwest, and how that imposes upon the neighbours. The neighbour directly next door, who spoke earlier, they would be looked down upon rather than looked over. Our building, as for the other buildings, Leanne inclusive, would be looked over and into. So I did table a submission earlier, and there were some accompanying plans. Would it be okay if I was to share my screen to review those plans with you?
Sure, but you've only got 3 minutes.
Okay, fine.
Bear that in mind.
Do you have a copy of the plans?
Thank you. No, I don't have those.
They were sent. If you can see my screen.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Oh, sorry. We do. Sorry, we do have the 2 plans. Sorry. The
can you see my
diagram
screen?
A and
Yeah,
diagram.
Okay.
Sorry, we do have those plans. Diagram A, B, and C.
Okay, so if you can
Yes,
have a
we
look
have
at
those.
diagram A that's on the screen at the moment. I'm hoping you can see that. There are 2 main components. The red hatched area is the non-compliant building encroachment into the 6 metre setback control, which is outlined in the DCP. The pink demonstrates an additional 3 metre, which is an ADG setback guideline, which hasn't been adhered to. So that is all at the cost of landscaping. You can see that there's less than 5% of the site or that's not built upon. So we see this coming too far to the western boundary, and we don't think we can accept that interface. So if you look at diagram B, you can see that there's a section I've highlighted in green. This is an area that is still an encroachment. Our request is that that area also be landscaped just to increase the buffer. Important to note that there's still, a significant non-compliance, but we do feel this would go a long way to making the outcome of the development a lot more sensitive in its setting. The other matter I wish to raise is here we have an elevated podium. It still breaches the setback control at the rear. You can see that line here. They've got decking proposed there. We propose that, any podium, residual podium, is landscaped entirely. There's ample decking to the north. The windows could remain as Juliet balconies.
That's the 3-minute, Bill, if you could please finish up.
Great. And that's really all I wanted to say. And in addition to that, I just wanted to request respectfully that we would like to see some privacy screens implemented on the western facade at the upper levels to prevent the overlooking. And I just want to say that all of these changes proposed do not undermine the commercial viability of the building in any way whatsoever. We haven't made any adjustments to the number of apartments or car spaces or what have you. It just needs to have a little bit more thought around the basement car parking area and that encroachment generally. That's all I have to say. And thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Pease. Yeah, I hadn't realised that you were an architect. I thought those plans must have been done by Tony Wood. Okay.
Tony is our consulting planner.
Yes,
who
I
will
understand.
address the panel.
Did you have any
Thank
questions?
you.
No, I don't.
Did you have any questions, Mr. Holt? Did you have any questions? Thank you for coming along today.
Thank you very much.
So actually, yes, Mr. Moody.
Chair and panel members, my name is Tony Moody, consultant planner. Unfortunately, I don't have the skills of an architect. I fully support Mr. Peters' amended plans. The need for a sensitive interface is clear. One, there's a zone boundary change. Two, the subject site is much higher than the adjoining properties. Three, there are semi-detached and detached dwellings of 1 to 2 scale. And four, you're within a heritage conservation area. It needs a sensitive interface, far more important, may I suggest, than if the interface was just on level ground, property to property. I consider that Mr. Peters' amended plans are eminently reasonable. One, because it creates a landscape interface between the town centre zone and the low density, I'll retract that, the R3 zone, but which, or the E3 zone, which includes basically semi-detached dwellings. Can I stress one point? There's not 1 square metre reduction in floor space by Mr. Peters' scheme. It is rare to come up with an amended scheme which improves the sensitive interface, but not affect the development yield. I should add that I was the unsuccessful consultant planner in 2004 in the Seaside Property Court planning principle. And I now, and then after the decision, agree that Commissioner Bligh was correct. And it just establishes the principle that where you have a zone boundary, you must have a sensitive interface. And particularly in these circumstances, as I've outlined, I earnestly request, and by the way, even with Mr. Peters' scheme, amended scheme, it still does not comply, but it at least does not reduce the development yield and provides a much more sensitive interface. I recommend approval subject to that scheme amended plans by Mr. Peters and the privacy measures on the western boundary. I should add, I commend Mr. Macri for his courtesy and professionalism at council, but I do think on that one issue, there's a fundamental flaw in not seeking a landscape interface. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just check. Did you have any questions?
No.
I'm fine. Thank you. No, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
The last objector is Mary Burford Williams. You're on mute. Oh, you're on mute?
Trouble with the microphone. Look, hello, my name's Mary Burford Williams and I reside at number 9 Sudan Street. It is our home. I agree and support the previous statements from Leanne and Lisa, Richard and Tony Moody. I still have a lot of concerns about the way the development looks and the scale of it. It is a slope to the street. So coming up the hill, the site definitely needs some sort of development to go on, but it would be appreciated if it was sympathetic towards our heritage streetscape, and also to consider the fact that coming up from where I am, it's going to look huge because of the slope of the land. I think it looks a bit like a behemoth and it really needs to have planting around it and to soften it up and meaningful deep soil landscaping, etc. That's all I have to offer. I don't want to repeat other issues, so I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
No.
No, thank you for coming on today. So our last speaker is the applicant, Joseph Sassine.
Good evening. Thank you, panel members. I believe I can be heard. Is that correct?
Yes, you can.
Wonderful. Look, I'll start. And I have handed over for short comments in terms of the suggested conditions to go with this DA. Some of them will respond to Lisa Scobell, our neighbour's concerns. I too have asked for there to be no pedestrian entry for an additional reason, and that is that the sliding door to the garage simply won't work if a pedestrian entry is added there. It actually is a safety concern and will prevent the sliding door from opening safely. In terms of the wall, it is at the fence. There is a half-metre wall to bring the soil level up to the garage entry level, and a solid fence above that along that boundary The reason being to keep the lights out from our neighbours' windows and onto that building. So it's not intended that that fence should be in any way see-through. That would be, I think, problematic with the lights of the vehicles. So that slatted fence is more intended for the front boundary, not the side boundary. Just so you know, we've gone through 3 different stages now addressing the western interface with council members and wanting to address the concerns of the neighbours. We've gone from deleting balconies entirely on the western facade and bringing them to the northern facade. And the only windows on that western facade now belong to 1 bedroom and 1 little study nook. There is no living rooms overlooking any of the neighbours' properties. And then an additional and final step that we went about working on in the last couple of months was deleting the podium that sat above that car park entry in order to soften the transition and the proximity to the buildings to our west. I respectfully disagree with some of the comments delivered today by Mr. Peters and Mr. Moody. We do comply on landscaping per the ADG. And the reason we have the car park entry as it is because it has been proven by our traffic engineer that this is the only manner in which we can gain access to this garage. There are differential heights on this site. We are restricted by the levels of the commercial accesses on Perouse Road, and we have worked backwards from there. And in addition to that, we've got issues with turning circles into the 2nd basement below, and that has driven the nexus between us and the neighbour to the west, and still resulting in a compliance on deep soil landscaping per the ADG. Apart from that, I guess I'm here to happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll just ask, did you have any questions?
Actually, I did have a question. In terms of the retaining wall and the solid fence above that, what's the construction material for the retaining wall?
Okay, so the retaining wall is retaining soil that will bring the soil level with the car park entry. So that will be a solid masonry wall, brickwork perhaps.
A masonry wall?
Yes, masonry wall.
And the fence above that, because it's not as much, it's not clear on the plans. What were you proposing?
So we'd be proposing a solid fence, nothing that can be seen through.
So if we were mindful to approve this, you would accept a condition which requires those details to be signed off by the council director?
Sure, but normally fences are an issue dealt with under the Dividing Fences Act. But
I think this particular issue, I wouldn't be dealing with it under the Dividing Fences Act. I think this is an issue which clearly one of the objectors has raised as a concern. I think it's a fairly minor issue that.
Sure, I'm just quite happy. Just I'd like to make sure they're happy that we don't want lights pouring into their side windows either. So we would like them to be solid.
I think that's where I'm trying to get to. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Absolutely happy with that.
Neighbour is sort of hoping for as well. That was the question I had.
Did you have any question?
No, my question was the same around the fencing.
And so you heard Mr. Peters and Mr. Moody were suggesting some changes, and you don't agree to any of those.
Look, we've gone through those suggested changes with the council planners. We physically cannot enter the property from any other location. So to simply draw a line and not look at the level changes between Perouse Road and Sudan Street and access into the garage does not work in any other way. This is right at its limits. And then the reason that some of the communal open space is presented as it is because there is a turning circle issue in the lowest basement. Again, we have proven through the traffic report that is required to execute turnings per the Australian standards.
Thank you. So there are no other questions. So we've now heard from all the registered speakers. In accordance with the panel guidelines adopted at the panel meeting on the 13th of December 2018, the public meeting will now be closed and the panel will deliberate and vote on each matter this public meeting in a closed session. We'll also deal with the electronic meeting. The outcomes from voting and determination will be made available through Council's website in the following days. An audio recording of the public meeting will also be made available through Council's website. I declare the council meeting closed at 1:47 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.